$200, a Super Nintendo setup costs twice as much as the old system. For the money, the company promises better pictures, sound, and adventure. Now you're playing with power, superpower. You're the king, I tell you! The king!
Only for Super NES.
Only on the Super NES.
You're listening to the SNES broadcast with your hosts, Soul Blazer and George.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Super NES podcast, episode number 20. 20. Oh, yeah, I'll be okay. 120.
20?
What I meant to say.
20?
Yeah, we had time to back. Your name's now Chad. But anyway, yes, 120 was I meant to say. I'm Greg. He's George, as always.
Yeah, that's me, I guess.
And we're covering George picked this time around, one of the classic games on the system. We're looking at the Super NES port of Final Fight, one of the most popular beat 'em up games, and really one of the first games to start the whole beat 'em up craze. When it came out in the arcades, like in the 80s. Developed and produced by Capcom. So. This is a game I have this is a series actually I have a good I have a good deal of experience with. George, what's your history with this? Why'd you pick this game?
Because I wanted to do an RPG, but then we were kind of busy, so then you gave me this suggestion.
Was it my suggestion? Okay.
It was actually. I was like, okay, yeah, no, that's not bad. That'd be something I would pick anyway.
Oh, okay, all right. I didn't realize that, but okay.
Yeah, I don't know if I told you, but like. Because you were telling me you were busy right now, and I was just like,
oh yeah, sure,
let's not do an RPG right now then. And I was like, I don't know, Greg, throw something at me, and then this is what you brought to me.
Yeah, well, I like fighting games. I mean, I'm not like
It was a beat 'em up, not a fighting game.
Yeah, well, yeah, but yeah, these games too. I mean, I'm not great at them. I still enjoy like playing them. So.
Oh yeah.
But. So Final Fight is a pretty rich and interesting history. The original game came out. On arcades in December 1989. And Capcom's original idea was this to be a sequel to Street Fighter, which came out 2 years earlier in 1987. Which they wanted to do something with, but Street Fighter by itself was not a very popular game. Even though you get some ports. But the Street Fighter team, like I said, wanted to work on something else. So the original idea was to have a Street Fighter 89, and this is how this game was really shown some trade shows. But then later on, they said it might be a better idea to have spin it off and make its own game out of it. So one team kept working on this game, which eventually became known as Final Fight, whereas the other team developed what eventually became Street Fighter 2. So. Inspiration for this game came from a number of places. One of them being the 1984 film Streets of Fire. Have you ever heard of that one, George?
No.
It's a weird sounding movie. I've not seen it before myself, but it's kind of like a mixture of. Wikipedia describes it as being a mix of musical, action, neo-noir, drama, and comedy, all rolled into one. William Dafoe starred in it, along with a couple. And Rick Moranis for a couple recognizable names. So, anyway, another big inspiration for this game was the arcade version of Double Dragon 2, which is a very popular game when it came out, and still my favorite. And Double Dragon 2 is a good game to get inspired by because that's a great game. It's sort of this day my favorite game in the series.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
So, oh yeah, the NES port of the game is very good. They actually have additional endings and stages in that version of the game that the arcade version didn't have. So I always appreciated when I always appreciated when a home game goes above and beyond the original arcade game. So Final Fight has a pretty simple plot, just being a beat 'em up game, of course, but the game takes place in a fictional city like known as Metro City, which is obviously based off of New York City. I mean, like, they don't actually say it anywhere, of course, but obviously it's based off of that. And so, so Mike Hager was recently elected as the mayor of the city. He is a former wrestler who's turned politician, trying to help clean the city. Mike Hager really seems inspired. Mike Haggard seems inspired to me by, and I know this is wrong because he came out before this happened, but Mike Haggard really seems inspired to me, kind of like Jesse Ventura. The whole
it's exactly what you think of if you
right.
Yeah.
But I think Jesse was still wrestling when this game came out. So
I don't know. I don't know years.
Right. So so like predates that. So anyway, Mike got elected.
Maybe he played this game and he was like,
Could have.
You imagine?
You don't see too many mayors actually going to the street, on streets like brawling like they're like people though.
And what I think Kane won mayor recently. The guy who's Kane was in Knox County in Tennessee or something like that, or
I remember that story.
Some southern state. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It does happen occasionally. So, but anyway, so Mike was elected in a campaign to clean up the city because because Metro City has been a very crime-infested for a long time. One gang, the Mad Gear Gang, is the most powerful of the gangs in the city. They're not very happy with Mike's policies. So under their leader, Belger, they kidnap Mike's daughter Jessica, trying to get him under his thumb, and of course Mike's having none of that. So he recruits to help two other people. Cody, who's Jessica's boyfriend, like a guy who's who's a longtime friend, to go go through the city stage by stage and beat up the gang and get her back. So that's pretty much the premise of the game, which is which is fine. So the Super NES version of the game, of course, has several notable differences. We'll get into that in more detail later on. But the biggest one of the biggest differences right now is that the guy who's moved from the game. You can only pick from either Mike or Cody to play as.
I like how this is relevant to a recent episode we did where one of our guests was talking about the version of Final Fight that only has Guy in it.
Yep. I was going to mention that later on because they do. Because Capcom did release a special version of this game later on for appropriately called Final Fight Guy, which replaces Cody of Guy. So that's
which is just such a weird choice.
Yeah, I know, because it's like I don't understand why the game couldn't fit all three characters. Granted, this is an early game, but still. So this came out. The Super NES version of the game came out in Japan with the systems very shortly after the system launched in December of 1990. North America got it early on. It was not a launch game, but it came out very shortly after the system's launch, November of 1991. And Europe did not see the game until December of 1992. So there are other ports of this game that are made. Besides the Super NES version of the game, at the time, 1990, it also got ported to the Amiga, Atari ST, Commodore 64, ZX Spectrum, and Amstrad CBC. And there's also a Sega CD version of the game, which came out in 1993. Much later, the game got a Game Boy Advance port in 2001, and the game also came out on both the Wii Virtual Console, and the Wii U's Virtual Console. When those when this came out, and the game was also, in the arcade version of the game at least, was also included. There was also included on a recent collection that Capcom released, the Capcom Beat 'em Up Bundle, which came out for the PS4, Switch, Xbox One, and Microsoft Windows in September of 2018. So the game's still getting a lot of I mean, you want proof about the game's lasting popularity and sales. It's the fact it's still being ported. So, there's also an iOS version of this game, which came out back in 2011, which I'm very curious to know how that would play, being like being on the phone.
You ever play a game on the phone that isn't like that doesn't include tapping, but more of like a virtual joystick or something like that? Oh, because I was gonna say then I was gonna say how it would feel, but I guess you wouldn't. It probably wouldn't be very good. Let's be honest here.
Yeah, exactly.
If there's controller support, that's a good thing.
Right. There's also a version of this game that was released for Japan only as part of the Sharp X68 X68000 line, which we talked about. So we talked about that computer before in the past. So a lot of ports. So yeah, this game that came out in the arcades is very, very popular. Like I said, this is one of the very first beat 'em up games that came out and really helped to popularize the genre, which kind of led to the explosion of the games in the arcades like in the years to come. And in many ways, Street Fighter, Final Fighter credited like helping to give the game a resurgence for like several years. It used the Capcom CP system, which is the most advanced sophisticated system that Capcom had for making arcade games like that time period. The Street Fighter games also came out using that system. A lot of games: Forgotten Worlds, Ghouls and Ghosts, UN Squadron, 1941, King of Dragons, Knights of the Round. Numerous games use this system. So it was a very powerful, very popular arcade hardware. It also became infamous later on because this is just a side note. The CP system also became known as being a suicide board because to prevent counterfeiting and hacking, Capcom also installed a battery on it. If power was lost to the battery, it would cause a surge to happen on the board to erase the data, but nobody could make bootleg copies of it. Well, over time, that battery leaks, and the acid on it, as the battery ages and decays, the acid will seep out and do damage and do sometimes permanent damage to the board. So that's
not 100% thing. You make it sound like there's a guarantee. There's no guarantee, but it's a good idea to be more safe than sorry. Yeah,
it's very likely because they if you know what you're doing and you're careful with removing it, it's no problem. But if you're not aware it's there, it can cause some damage. So, but anyway, so the game itself, as I said, was very, very popular. So the Super NES port of the game has numerous versions, numerous differences to it. Which I played this game back when it first came out, like both the arcade and the Super NES version. I never owned the game for the Super NES, but I did play it quite a lot. And way back when we covered on this podcast, we covered the Super NES version 3 by 2. Which is also obviously Capcom, and that version of the game was almost arcade perfect. I mean, the difference between the arcade game and the Super NES part of that game was almost nothing, and that game was really the killer app for the Super NES as far as helping drive sales. For some reason, and I know some of these reasons, but on a lot of them, there are numerous changes with the Super NES version of this game, and I'm not really sure why all of them happened. Because there was a lot of stuff that was changed when the game came out, during the game came out on the Super NES. I already mentioned that Guy was removed. Let's only have 2 playable characters. Talk about them real quick here, just to compare them. Hacker's the strong but slow type. He's very powerful. He uses a lot of wrestling moves in his fighting, grabs and power drivers, that kind of stuff. His special attack is my
favorite wrestling move, grab.
His special attack is like a kind of a swinging circular punch. Cody is a more balanced guy. He's like, he's kind of your average like fighter. Good mix of speed and moves, speed and moves in him. The aforementioned missing, unfortunately, guy is kind of the fast weak option for this game because of his training. He's very nimble. He's very fast. His moves, his punches and kicks are very quick. But out of the three characters, he does least amount of damage. So maybe Capcom realized that he wasn't, that he was the least popular character, and due to the size limitations of the game, they felt nobody really missed him like they moved him. I'm not sure, but just kind of making a guess. But the game's also missing a whole stage. The whole Desert Railroad stage of the game is missing, and it's also missing the 2-player co-op option, which arcade version had. So that's unfortunately like 1 player only, which sucks.
Yeah, they screwed the pooch on that, didn't they?
Many of the scene transitions, which arcade version of the game had, were taken out. Again, probably for size reasons. What I mean by transitions, like in the arcade version of the game, you see the character actually like walk through doors, walk downstairs, enter rooms, that kind of stuff. In this version of the game, that's been taken out. You just kind of like, the screen shifts, boom, you're there. So, also because of hardware limitations, the Super NES could only handle like 3 enemies on screen at once, like along your character. So, whereas the arcade version of the game, you could have the arcade version of the game, you could have up to 10 characters on 10 enemies on screen at once. So definite limitation there with limitation there like, as far as the hardware goes. To make up for it though, the Super NES version does have more stopping points. What that means, kind of like that the checkpoint system. Like maybe that in case you like die or die or whatnot, and enemy placements are very different. Enemies will come at you from different sides, from different angles, that kind of stuff, like compared to the arcade version of the game. So I guess it's a good transition point. There may only be like 3 enemies on screen at once, but the game flows pretty well. There is some slowdown, when that happens, but I think it's like pretty minimal. The game seems to play like very smoothly. The characters move around like pretty well. The fighting transitions between your moves and whatnot like are pretty smooth and balanced. Nothing really, except for like minimal slowdown, because slowdown was a problem that plagued many early Super NES games. The slowdown in this game kind of felt like pretty minimal, all things considered. So I guess it was kind of like, so I guess they had to make the choice about reducing enemies on screen to allow for that. I guess I understood like why it was done. So I mean, it sucks, but it's restored during the time period when sacrifices had to be made sometimes for games, like arcade ports coming out for home. So I mean, yeah.
I think the best parts of this game are just the visual aspects.
Oh yeah, the graphics are great. The graphical quality carried over like an arcade, thank God, at least, because the characters are big and bright and detailed. The stage backgrounds look very nice. You have destructible objects that you can use, like bash up like on signs and barrels and other that kind of stuff. So, yeah. Did you have any problems with any kind of choppiness or slowdown playing this, George?
No, I didn't see any of that.
So yeah, it was a conscious choice that Capcom made. Unfortunate, but also this version of the game got censored pretty heavily, which is kind of funny because we're talking about censorship. A bit off mic before starting the podcast, but curiously enough, many of these differences were between the Japanese Super Famicom version of this game and a game like in the US version. That is, the Japanese version of the game had these things right in the arcade, but when the game came out in the US, probably the censor policy at the time, this was taken out. let's see here. The big differences are that the first two bosses were changed and renamed. I don't know. I have no idea why. There wasn't anything offensive in those characters, like, as far as I can tell. The final boss guys, Belger, like an arcade game, he had a wheelchair. I don't know why they felt the need to change that for this version of the game. It looks like an office chair, like this version of the game instead.
I guess because they didn't want it to look bad, like, hey, you're beating a guy that's in a wheelchair.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I mean, what would it make somebody look bad if they were beating up a guy in a wheelchair? Yeah. That's kind of a wrong thing to do. I mean, you don't know the backstory, but yeah,
true.
It's it's kind of just like I don't know. I can't think of an example that would be good enough, but yeah, like I could see it as like he's beating up a handicapped person or handicapable. I don't know. What? Sure, we'll go with that. He's beating up a handicapable person. That's not cool. Like, I could see it like that,
Diminishes the quality of that final boss fight, though, unfortunately, because in the arcade version of the game, it's a very cool fight. Because the first part of the, because in the arcade version, the first part of the fight, he's holding Jessica to keep her hostage, and he uses his chair with he's using his chair to actually attack you. And the chair actually had like weapons and stuff attached to it. Like, they're pretty cool. So, after a while, when you weaken him enough, you knock Jessica away, to safety. By that point, it becomes like, a one-on-one, to more direct fight instead. So, speaking about having problems beating up a guy in a wheelchair, how do you feel about games? How do you feel about games, George, like you have beat up like women?
Do they have a chance of fighting back?
Yes.
Well then, I mean, as long as they're not in a wheelchair and they're not, defenseless, I mean, is it wrong?
Well, somebody thought so, because the arcade version of the game had two women characters like in the gang. And those, the Super NES version of the game, they were replaced by male enemies instead.
See, I definitely see censorship like that being a little more, like, I mean, it's a different era, and we're also talking about like earlier United States, but like, yeah, that censorship can definitely be seen as like sexist now, where it's like, oh, he's beating women. Women aren't strong enough to fight men. Where it's just like, well, I don't know. That's definitely not true. I've definitely seen a lot of women much stronger than men. But, it's one of those things, a weird cultural thing over here.
Yep. So, yeah. So there's that. To be fair, though, the power version of the game had the same censorship. So,
yeah.
But obviously, all the alcohol and blood references in the game were taken out. For example, in the arcade version of the game, if you stab somebody with like a knife or a sword, because you could, because you always pick weapons as you go through the game. The arcade version of the game had some blood. There was like a small blood splash, a blood splash effect. This is taken out. This is obviously removed the Super NES version of the game. The Super NES version of the game also had two health recovering items taken out. They were booze in the arcade version, in the arcade version of the game, and this version of the game they're just like different items. So, here's two more strange reports. Did you ever get during the game you get a bonus stage where you're challenged to destroy a car in a certain amount of time. And obviously this is also a product of its time, because the car has like a Japan license plate on it. So, again, this is during the time period where like Japan was taking over and the economy was super hot and everybody was like very afraid of like the Japanese taking over the world, that kind of stuff. So, they're obviously.
Would it really be a bad thing if the Japanese took over the world, though? Let's be honest here.
Probably not. Well,
they're pretty smart. They're pretty efficient. I mean,
they're still very like backwards leaning with like women, for example. Just talking about that again. So, there are some cultural problems, but yeah, beyond that, yeah, you definitely could argue it. You give a case. But anyway, that bonus game, it's like an arcade version of the game, like a really funny scene. If they managed to destroy the car enough, the owner of the car comes on the screen a moment later, and actually says in voice like, "Oh my God," falls to his knees, falls to his knees and cries over the damage he did to his car because the car looked like totally wrecked.
I thought he said something more like, "Hey, my car," or something like that. No.
Yeah, in the Super NES version of the game, they changed it to "Oh my car" instead.
Oh, okay.
Take out the good again religious censorship. So, but that one word just can kind of you just seems that bit like strange, like really they had to go that far. But so, and also one last change that also is very like kind of mind scratching by today's standards. There are some black characters in the arcade game who are made white in this one.
See? Sexist and racist censorship. Look at that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, I don't know. But
I'm not even touching that one. That's just completely wrong.
Yeah. So, yeah, a lot of differences. So, having said all that, as long as you're okay with the fact that the game was neutered in some ways, it plays pretty well at least. I mean, like you still have the fun, like you still have the challenge and the fun of the game, like the fun gameplay, like the arcade version here. So, even with like one of the characters and stages missing, most of that stuff you wouldn't know about was missing unless you played the arcade version of the game first.
Right.
So, so the actual and the music was, the music was ported over very well. The soundtrack, the soundtrack of the game is very good.
It was ported over well?
Yeah.
Really? You think that?
The arcade version of the game, you couldn't hear the music. The arcade version of the game, you couldn't hear the music all that well because of all the sound effects and everything that's going on in the background.
Geez, either the music wasn't very good on the arcade version, or your ears are broken.
It wasn't great in the arcade version for several reasons. Like I just said, it was hard to hear. The sound effects often washed over it. The music in the version of the game is cleaned up and sounds better.
Because the music in this game sounds like a terrible Rush. It sounds like if it was ported from the Genesis and they didn't rearrange the sound to utilize the Sony sound chip in the SNES and they just left it as is. That's what it sounds like to me. That's what the music sounds like in this game. It sounds like it comes from a Genesis game that they never just like redid for SNES hardware.
Well, the CP arcade board is definitely capable of some great music. I mean, after all, like US Squad,
of course, yes.
Like obviously used it. So, yeah, I don't know. I just felt the music sounded better in this version of the game. Like it's a decent, it's a decent soundtrack. I think the songs repeat too much. There's not really like a very big, it's not a very big soundtrack, but yeah, I thought I thought it fit the game appropriately enough to be sounded very like rockish techno kind of like stuff. So
it sounds like a lot of bass, but not. The music is, I already said it, but the music is just, I don't know. It's how do I explain it as mediocre, but like worse than mediocre at the same time? How do I explain it that way? Just you have to listen to it and be like, there's a decent amount of bass in here, but it just doesn't fit well together. Like I said, it almost sounds like it was on the Genesis and then they just took it over and brought it to the Super Nintendo without like redoing the music for the hardware. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, I suppose, but anyway, so to address these, some of these problems, Capcom decided in 1992 to do a revised version of this game, which is the aforementioned Final Fight Guy. That version of the game mostly. The major difference in that version of the game was obviously Cody was replaced by Guy as a playable character, and they even went so far as to change the opening ending to explain Cody's absence, which is why I was missing the version of the game, which is very curious.
Weird. Also, this is like a much more rare version of the game.
Oh yeah, right. Yep. So definitely gonna get to that in a moment. This version of the game also includes 4 difficult settings. It also has 2 new power-ups, and the North American version of the game came out. The North American version of the game came out in June 1994. Originally, it was one of those. Originally, this was one of those blockbuster only releases.
Oh god, yeah, those things. Or
Right.
I mean, one of those things.
But the game did. But the following year, the game did get a very limited release, like in stores. So it's not quite as rare as it could be if it was only blockbuster only. Having said that, this version of the game is still like very rare, like and very expensive. So, yeah, Final Fight Guy is a much better version of Final Fight. So unless you have a hankering to play the Cody, that version of the game is probably your preferred version of the game. You're going to play on the Super NES. As far as the best version of the game for home release period, the Sega CD version of the game, Final Fight CD, is very good. So is the Game Boy Advance version of the game, which is known as Final Fight 1. Both those versions of the games featured things that the Super NES version of the game was missing. And like I said, also this game was also just this version of the game has been the arcade version of the game at least has been included 3 times in Capcom collections. Capcom Classic Collection Volume 1 for PS2 and Xbox. The Capcom Classic Collection Remix for the PSP. And as previously mentioned, the recently released Capcom Beat 'em Up Bundle, like for the modern consoles. So numerous versions that plays version of the game, and the arcade versions of the game really are better than the home version of the game. I mean, when this came out, this was a very good serviceable version of the game. It's just too bad that so much of the game had to be cut or censored for various reasons. So, but yeah, this was the first game of a franchise that's still around today. As a matter of fact, this game got 2 proper sequels. In Final Fight 2 and Final Fight 3, both of which came out on Super NES later on, in later years. There's also some spin-off games such as like Final Fight Mighty. There's also Final Fight Revenge, and the most recent game in the series was Final Fight Streetwise, which came out 2006. The franchise is still technically alive in the sense that Capcom's still porting the game to various things, but they haven't made a new. But that was the last new original Final Fight game that was made 13 years ago. So Capcom probably is not going to do anything else more of it at this point.
Which one's the one that's on the NES?
The NES. That's a. That's a parody original game, like Mighty Final Fight.
Okay.
It wasn't made by the same team. It's inspired by Final Fight. It's known for having the super deformed characters instead. So.
And then wasn't there a Final Fight that they were gonna make, and then they redesigned it and made it a different game on PlayStation or something like that?
They could have. I mean, Final Fight characters have shown up in. I know. Final Fight characters have shown up. Shown up. Trying on the Capcom series. Obviously Street Fighter. But Final Fight characters have also shown up in Forgotten Worlds and Saturday Night Slam Masters.
Yeah, but I mean, like, this was supposed to be a Final Fight game, and then they decided to not make it a Final Fight game.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
What the heck was it? I don't know. I'm trying to look it up.
So there's also and so there's also been like a there's also some like Final Fight inspired like comics and the comics and cartoons, and there was a last year a fan produced episode based upon the game came out on YouTube, which is like pretty curious. So I may have to look look it up. So
this is weird. Apparently Sony still has or Sony has parts of their website that give you information on PS2 games.
Mm-hmm.
Because I found Streetwise here. And why? Why would they still have information on PS2 games? This is weird.
You're complaining?
It's on PlayStation's website. Am I complaining? I mean, there's even... Okay, this is what's very weird is because there is no way to navigate to anything about PlayStation 2, and yet it is still part of the website. That is very weird. Anyway, go on. What were you saying?
I was just gonna finish up. Like one pretty cool trivia bit. So you remember the actor like Robert? You remember the actor like Robin Williams, right?
Yeah.
So did you know he was a big video game fan?
Of course, his daughter's name is Zelda.
Right. He also named his son Cody, which apparently is supposed to be after Cody from Final Fight. So,
I did not know that, though.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, so pretty cool. But,
yeah, I mean, because they also, what was it? I know Nintendo got him to do a couple of commercials for, like, one of the Zelda games on 3DS or something.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I remember those. Okay. Yeah. So like pretty cool. I couldn't find any. Final Fight sold very well in Super DS. I couldn't find any like sales figures. But apparently Capcom said that the Final Fight series total for home version of the game is sold about 3.4 million units.
Huh.
So like there's a very popular. Very popular franchise, like for sure. So, the reviews of the game were pretty positive when it came out. They ranged from like high average to great scores. So the closest, the lowest score I could find was EGM giving it a 7 out of 10. Most of the publications gave 80s and 90s. So very very highly high regarded. Here's something. Here we go. One of the reviews I didn't see this before. One of the reviews quotes directly somebody from Capcom saying that the Super NES version of Final Fight sold 1.5 million copies worldwide.
Huh.
Very very popular game. There is one cheat code available in this game to bring up the secret option menu. On the title screen, if you hold down the L button and push start, you bring up the option screen. Where we can change things like the number to the number of lives you get, and the number of lives you get, and the number continues.
Okay.
You can also there's also an option mode you can access. Like on that from there, where you hold L and R and push start button, the start button, the start button, the house screen. You can also play the music and sound effects like in the game. And one last secret: if you enter your after your game's over with, you can also enter your player initials, just like the arcade version of the game. If you play 3 games and enter your initials, like the top 3 high scores are Cap, Calm, and Guy. In that order, you can start a game with 5 credits instead of 3.
Okay. That's how would anyone figure that out?
Probably somebody Capcom released that.
Probably. I mean, unless somebody was just crazy enough to try it. No idea. That's weird.
Yeah. So. But yeah. Anyway, lots of ways to play Final Fight these days. Still, how's the game hold up? Pretty well, I think. I mean, like, knowing what I do now about all the limitations that the game had, and how many more superior versions of the game have come out in the year since then. I can't really recommend this version of the game anymore. But for when it came out, for what it was a very, very good port. Not as arcade perfect as Street Fighter 2 was, unfortunately, but still, all things considered, especially being this early, especially this being a very early Super NES game. So I thought it was like pretty great port, fun game, not that difficult, I think. Relatively quick to go through. So a fun, challenging, fun, challenging beat 'em up game that kind of has like a lot of things going for it. I thought so. Definitely a very culturally important game as far as its a place in history and the significance for later games to follow and that kind of stuff. So, what about you, George? What are your wrap up conclusion thoughts about this?
I really don't think it holds up well today.
Okay.
Yeah, it just seems way too simplistic in multiple ways. The combat is just like one button for jump, one button for attack, and the attacks, there's not much you can do. Either you're doing a jump kick, a drop kick, or whatever, or you're just attacking. But then on top of that, it doesn't. I don't want to say it doesn't feel responsive, but it's just maybe a little sluggish or something, because
yeah, it is a bit sluggish.
There are times where it's just I'm getting thrown all over the place, and it's just I'm trying to do something, but I can't do anything. So there's that too, where if you get hit, that's it. You just have a big window where you could just get thrown all around and lose a life without being able to really fight back.
But to be fair, well, yeah, that's true. But to be fair, the arcade version of the game is the same way.
Oof, that's a little rough.
Well, again, remember, arcade game quarter bunchers, they want your money, so, they like so cheap things like that are present.
Yeah, but you don't have a quarter slot on the Super Nintendo, so don't make it so bad.
Yeah, they hadn't learned, they had not learned that lesson yet. Because like I said, this is an early game, as far as the system goes. So, like I said, Final Fight Guy, I think is I think it addresses some of these problems that the original game, the original version of the game had. So, but yeah, I did, yeah. So, we agree to disagree a little bit on this, but but the game itself is definitely important. Final Fight was definitely one of the most popular and successful beat 'em up series. That come out over the years. So I
think Streets of Rage is better.
The music definitely better. The soundtrack like those games is great.
Yeah.
The characters are definitely better. The characters are definitely better in Streets of Rage. I just think the graphics, the fighting moves are a little bit better in Final Fight.
I don't think so.
But yeah, Streets of Rage series is very good. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm really looking forward to the new game coming out.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, the company has a good track record, so who knows?
Yeah, it would be. I would really like to see it.
Yep. So I'm not sure when it's coming out. Probably later on this year, but so yeah, looking forward to it. Maybe like Final Fight will come back at some point. I mean, like, like the last game in the series was not very successful, which is why it hasn't been around like for a while.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that's the reason why we haven't seen it in a while.
Well, they released it. Well, this is a 3D beat 'em up game. Like finding out that just very, very generic. There was no soul in it. Final Fight Streetwise, the game we're talking about here.
No.
It wasn't anything new or fun. It was just kind of like, nah, been here, done that. So they just slapped the Final Fight name on, like, called it a day. Unfortunately, so
I haven't gotten around to playing it yet, so.
The soundtrack's the best thing. The soundtrack's the best thing about the game. A bunch of groups a bunch of rock and techno groups did the music for it. RZA, Mos Def, Fear Factory, Slipknot, Soulfry, Dub Pisto, Shadows Fall, Oprah,
wow.
Little Flip, Nappy Roots, Dujus, I think it's pronounced, and Gizmaji, all could be like songs of the game.
That's so weird.
It is weird.
Yeah, that's weird.
But it's a great soundtrack. So, but let me give you just drive home the point how bad that game is. Metacritic gives it 43%.
Okay.
It's bad. But anyway, Final Fight, definitely interesting game. Like, I still think it's an okay game today. Definitely not as good as it was when it first came out, like all those years ago. But a lot of games have not aged well for various reasons, so I can't really hold it against it like too much. But anyway, your criticism definitely like applies as far as some of the game's weak points here, for sure, George. So if you're not playing the Final Fight 2 and Final Fight 2 and Final Fight 3, I think kind of address some of those problems. Those like better games. Those games were Super NES only. There was no arcade port to base it off of, which helps, because sometimes trying to port an arcade game over can be like problematic, to say the least. But because the game was so popular, it's pretty common and cheap on eBay. You would not have any problem like finding the game like for sale if you want to pick it up. 119 copies currently listed on eBay. When I checked, 86 copies of the game that recently sold. These prices include shipping. Card only, ranging from $7.50 to $23.
That's not too bad.
Yeah. CIB's not that bad either. I mean, as usual, CIB pricing is a wide difference. But CIB copies started as cheap as like $24.50, and then went as high as $97. There was even a seller selling 2 sealed copies of the game recently. Those sold for $104. So, like even the sealed copies were like pretty cheap as far as sealed copies go.
Yeah, compared to other games that are just like $5,000. Oh, yeah, sure. Let me get my credit card right away. Final Fight Guy. That obviously that game's much rarer. Rarer. Expect to pay anywhere from $200 to $500 to if they want that game. So, but anyway. So yeah, thank you very much for tuning into the podcast as always. Like, we very appreciate it. We are still trying to decide upon a game for the set upon a game for the next episode. George and I have talked about a couple of games. I usually like to try to announce on here what we're covering next, but we're not quite sure about this yet. So it'll be a surprise when we do the next episode. So it should be
I can't say I can't say that it would be a game that's a very cult favorite. It's a very neat game because whichever game we cover, I think the terms, I think the terminology will cover it like very well. So we will see. But anyway, if you wish to support us, we have a Patreon. That's available at the SNES podcast. www.patreon.com. The SNES podcast. For $1 a month, you can get bonuses such as having your name mentioned in the podcast. Like I mentioned, Chad, Daniel, Richard, and Savannah right now at this point for backing us. Also, early access to the episodes, and also being able to dictate a game for us. We also have a Facebook group. We're welcome to give us feedback, comments, suggestions, that kind of stuff. And the podcast is also available for listening pleasure on Libsyn and iTunes. If you wish to email me directly, you can do so. The email address is thesnspodcast@yahoo.com. George, where can people like find you at?
Basically just Twitter if you're interested. I'm on there. My Twitter handle would be @_Derpkin_. So that would be @_DERPKITTEN_, and that's about it.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything you want to plug coming up? Anytime soon that you're doing? Streaming, podcasts, that kind of stuff?
No.
Okay. Cool. All right. Yep. So, anyway, thank you. Anyway, as always, thank you very much for listening to us. And yeah, definitely, by all means, take out your aggression. After a long day, being up, to being up video game characters, and not like picking fights like in real life.
To get a copy of Final Fight and start wailing at it. Put it up against your wall and just keep punching it.
You can do that too if you want to. They're cheap enough.
Yep.
So thank you again, everybody, and take care. We'll catch you again next time.
Goodbye.
Nintendo controls 80% of the video market. But no matter how you play the game, or which game you play, things definitely have come a long way since Pac-Man.
Now you're playing with power. Deep power.